Welcome to the Sustainable Living podcast Green Female Voices season. I'm thrilled to have with me today Gina Aspelin Hedbring, the project manager of Smart City Sweden. With her extensive expertise in sustainable urban development, Gina is here to shed light on Sweden's innovative approaches to building smart and eco-friendly cities. Gina, welcome to Sustainable Living podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Let's dive into our conversation and discuss about the smart city strategy in Sweden. As a project manager at Smart City Sweden, you're at the forefront of Sweden's smart city initiatives. Can you give us an overview of Sweden's smart city strategy and its key objectives?
Well, I think, there's so many different angles to this and perspectives. I think a key thing to know about Sweden when you talk about the city planning and urban planning and all those things that comes with it is that in Sweden, we have a very decentralized municipal power. So actually, the strategies in itself is very much with the municipalities. Then, of course, you will have requirements or objectives, ambitions set by the state. So I wouldn't say there's like one specific strategy, but something that's very common all over Sweden is to look at the quadruple helix model, which is when you do the urban planning that you really make sure that you get different perspectives. Like, of course, the public perspective, the municipal, the public organizations, but you also get the private organizations involved in doing the urban planning, but also academia. What does the research say, and how does we get the most effectiveness and the best value out of what we do? But also to get people involved, to have the citizen engagement. What do they actually need, and what do they want, and what do they don't know that they need? So I would say that that's one of the common concepts for the last 2 decades, I would say, really taken into these different perspectives when building new parts or refurbish or changing existing parts of a city. It's very briefly, but it's
That's fine. We have a long interview. We will have the opportunity to touch each segment of this answer. So we all know that Sweden has been a pioneer in sustainable development. Could you share with us how Sweden's approach to connecting different components of sustainable city has influenced global practices, particularly in the energy, climate, and environmental sectors?
No, it's big questions. I think it's no simple answer to that, but just to give a bit of the history, I think that Sweden is a country that's if you go 100 years back, Sweden, we didn't have a lot. And we're also a country far up north. It's cold. We can't grow and harvest, food all year round. We really need to think, what do we have? And how can we be innovative with what we have? What are the resources that we have that we can live on? And we have also been lucky that we've had, Sweden hasn't had a war for 200 years. So we've had a quite stable in that perspective. And even if we've had crisis, we definitely have had crisis. But if you look on what have we been doing, I think one of the main crises to talk about is the oil crisis in the 70s. And already in the 60s, Sweden started having a lot of issues with the water and air pollutions. So already in the 60s, the awareness of our environment started to grow. And in the 60s, then there was a lot of effort, especially on air and water. Sweden has, thousands of lakes. We have a lot of different kinds of water. We also have a lot of islands. So how would we manage all of these resources in an efficient way? With that said, Sweden is a small country. We need to be connected globally. Just to have a Swedish market, Sweden in total is 10 million inhabitants. To many countries, that's equal to a city. It's not even a big city in some of the global countries that we have. So when we talk about cities in Sweden, they are not that big sometimes. And when we talk about the Swedish market, it's not that big sometimes, many times, most of the time. So we both need to find things we need outside of the Swedish borders, outside of the Nordics, but we also needed to get the innovations and best practice that we came up with, we need to get it outside of Sweden. So I think that's connecting Sweden internationally has both been on a private perspective, but also on a public one, where Sweden has for a long time been very internationally connected to many countries. And that has been a part of the history and the ways of working, both from the official and the private sector in Sweden. When it comes to building smart cities or smart and sustainable cities, I think that this awareness of environment and sustainability came early. Our previous, now we don't have it anymore, but we have a specific environmental agency, was one of the first ones in the world. So we have been discussing and talking about these issues for a long time. As an example, today, one of the largest issues that we have globally is landfills. The landfills is taking a lot of space. It's a lot of hazardous substances in this. It's creating a lot of not only trash being annoying, but it's also creating a lot of pollution and also affecting people's life and health. Sweden already in the 70s starting to notice that having landfills is not a good idea. We need to do something with our landfill. We need to get rid of them. They're taking too much space. So we have been working with these issues for a long time, and we really believe that we have a lot of experience, both where we have succeeded, but also where we have failed, because we have tried so many different kinds of solutions. And we really believe that it can be learned internationally. And that's something that we are continuing doing. And our solution is not the best ones all over the world. You always need to adapt it to the local context. But there are, both success and failures to learn from.
Let's discuss about Sweden's commitment to renewable energy. Could you delve into Sweden's advancements in the renewable energy sources like wind and biofuels, and their significant contribution to reducing CO2 emissions and promoting sustainability, of course?
Of course, no, Sweden has a very ambitious agenda for a long time. And I think that one thing that we truly believe in is that if you look on the numbers, Sweden has already from in the beginning of the 90s, we have been able to lower our CO2 emissions, the terrestrial emissions, with more than 30%. And that's very much about how we have looked in, as an example, heating of our buildings. And in the beginning of the 90s, Sweden started a journey really implementing district heating system as an example. And with that, we have been able to lower the emissions with 30%, taking into account, that's the total emissions, that we've also grown with 2 million people. So it's not only the same amount of people, but we've also made a big growth in terms of number of people. Of course, there's a number of other aspects that happen as well. Industries has changed and there's lots of other things happening. But that's been one of the main targets, to lower our emissions when it comes to the electricity production. We are also fortunate because we have a lot of hydropower in Sweden, which has been a very good base for us. So we started off already with a very good footprint, so to say. With that said, Sweden is a long country, and we do also have issues with a lot of the hydropower being up in the north, and we have most of the people living in the south part of Sweden. So it's not always easy, as many people know. Production happens somewhere and consumption is elsewhere, and that's not always easy to manage. But again, I think the oil crisis in the 70s really put renewable energy, or maybe not renewable energy at that point, on the agenda, but you needed to find other solutions because you realized that the dependency on one specific source of energy it's very vulnerable. It can affect you quite a lot. And already at that point, solar cells were already possible, but very expensive. They weren't really something available on the big market. Wind power is you look at wind power today and say, oh, this is new renewable energy, but the wind power in itself with windmills is a technology or an idea that you've been using for hundreds of years. Using the wind for energy has been something that we have been doing for a long time. Just look at sailboats. So it's really, but then I think Sweden has not been afraid of trying to, or been driving to be the first one implementing these solutions, trying out how can we implement them, what are the issues, not only regarding technology, but also related to policy and regulations and business models. Sweden has had a very holistic perspective, no matter the solution they want to implement. It's the holistic perspective. It's not only about the technology, it's about the business model, it's about policies and regulations, it's about citizen engagement. How do you get buy-in from people? I think we all know, and we struggle with that in Sweden as well, to get the buy-in, to have wind power on mountains or out in the sea. Same thing where we have been struggling though when it comes to telecom towers when they were being built. So today we actually, it's increasing every year, I would say, and of course the last 2 years has been challenging. But we have been increasing solar and wind quite drastically the few years. So I think we're reaching almost 60% of renewable energy now, which is great. If we look at fossil-free energy, we have reached even further, but that's also then, of course, related to that we have still some nuclear that we are relying on.
Mobility is a crucial aspect of sustainable urban living. Would you enlighten us on the innovative solutions that Sweden has developed to promote sustainable transportation in urban areas, and how these solutions align with the concept of smart cities?
Yeah, so, sometimes you need to think, what is mobility? So mobility is a need that you need to go from point A to point B. But the first thing you can actually think about, do you really need to go from point A to point B? Or can you do something, how can you manage that somewhere else? I think that if during the pandemic, we all learned that it's very easy, that we don't have to move that much. It's actually possible to manage anyhow. But, and then what can we do in terms of walking? And I think here is the holistic perspective when we talk about the city, that mobility is so integrated in the city. So when you do urban planning, you also need to think about the mobility. How much people will live there? How will they move and why? So in Sweden, we do the urban planning in the big cities. You also think about what are the necessities that you need to have close by where you live to minimize that you have to actually move that far. How far is your grocery store? How far is your kindergarten or the school or an hospital? So first of all, the concept of the 15-minute city, which was actually a French concept from the beginning, is something that's been really discussed in Sweden as well. Like, how do you build these local communities in the city? Addition to that, I would say that the last 10, 15 years, it's also then looking at what are the new business model related to mobility. So as one thing, carpooling, can you actually have cars on the street so you actually can rent it yourself when you need it? Or can you have one? If you live in Sweden, we have this housing association where you own the house together with your neighbors. Will the housing association have their car and then you book it when you need it? So different kinds of business models to get the transportation when you need it. And this, not only cars, bicycling, scooters as well. So how can you actually provide the different kinds of means in terms of mobility? Then, of course, public transportation is a very big part and will continue being that. Sweden has been putting a lot of efforts on public transportation for ages and still are. So those are some of the aspects. But then also that might annoy some people living in cities like Stockholm and Gothenburg is when you do the urban planning, also do not plan to have parking spaces, because if there's not parking spaces, people will not take their car. And that's of course annoying, especially when you take them away. So when you build new parts of the city, in Stockholm at least, I think they plan for less than 1 car per apartment. So if you have a car, well, you have to take the hassle of having the car. So that, of course, incentivizes people not having a car. And they dedicate spaces for carpooling solutions. They dedicate spaces for bicycles. So they're dedicating space to do other means of transportation. But I really do think that the business model is a crucial aspect to this. It's not only about co-owning a car together, but maybe also renting the car from your neighbor or that kinds of solution. And there are those kind of apps today where you more or less can rent your car from your neighbor. I think it's your car, if you have a car, you use it not that many minutes a day or hours, and then most of the time it's just standing there doing nothing. So it's not it's a resource that we don't use that much. Most of us, of course, some do.
Let's discuss about digitalization, because it's another important aspect when we are discussing about smart city development. Could you elaborate on Sweden's digital competitiveness and how it has facilitated sustainable development, particularly in energy, waste management, and urban planning?
Of course. No, I think the digitalization is, it's a hygiene factor, but it's also something. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, you have really difficulties doing a lot of things, more or less. There's generations today who don't know how to behave if your internet is not working. But how digitalization in Sweden is also have a quite long story, to be honest, that Sweden set up an agenda already in the 90s that every person, every household in Sweden should have fixed broadband. I don't think we actually have reached that yet with a fixed line, a fixed wire. But I would say that we have a very high rate of people in their household actually having high-speed internet today. And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of companies to have a high level of data storage or need a lot of data management put their efforts in Sweden, because we have a very, very good and stable digital infrastructure. It's built all over the country. It's built in redundancies. It's also built in redundancies to other parts of the Nordics and the Europe. So with that said, we have built for a long time a very, very good and strong and stable, more or less, digital infrastructure. Combining with towers, combining with different kinds of technologies to be able to reach both urban areas, of course, but also rural areas. Using technologies that also reach far outside of the shores, so you can communicate on the boats, etc. So, but again, that's something that's been put in effort for a long time.
Social sustainability is as crucial as environmental sustainability. Could you shed light on how Sweden prioritizes social inclusion and equality in its urban planning and development projects?
Yes, of course. And I think that they all go hand in hand. Like then of course there are some adaptations that you need for specific people to be able to be truly integrated in the city. But I would say that the agencies in Sweden are putting quite a lot of requirements on when you build, especially if you build new housing areas, a lot of efforts on how are the pedestrian streets designed so everyone can use them. Are the elevators or not? How are the bathroom looks like? Can everyone access them? And how? And where are they located? So that's really getting the quality that the city should be easily accessible for everyone, no matter if you move slow or fast, or if you have any disabilities or any other kinds of challenges. this is also, of course, something you always need to improve, because you have parts of the city, if you look at Stockholm and Gothenburg and Malmö, parts of those cities are hundreds of years old. So, it's not easy everywhere. But there is a lot of efforts to making sure that everyone feel inclusive and that everyone feel like they can take part of what's happening in the city. Also using different language, having buttons to get information in speech if you can't read, also having information digitally if you need to find it beforehand. How can I behave? Another thing that we're working as well, if you look on new construction, is that how do you actually construct new infrastructure so it feels safe for everyone? As one example, before, if you have a street, you normally build a pedestrian tunnel because it's a mess if all the cars need to stop because everyone needs to cross, so you build a tunnel. They can be dark, they can feel unsafe. So in many places where they have more space and possibility, they actually don't build tunnels, they build the cars in the tunnel, and then you have open spaces for the people to move around in instead. You can also use that for green areas, etc. Or if you build tunnels, you build them wide, you build them light, you make sure that it's not narrow and dark and that they feel unsafe. If you also connect social sustainability to feeling safe and feeling equal and that everyone can move around, if you connect that to mobility, it's also when you do the route planning of the public transportation, making sure that no one has, then it's a matter of course, it's subject how far you want to walk to your next train station or a bus station, but you have one in proximity. So you always can get home or go home without having to pass or walk too far.
Let's discuss about wooden construction that is gaining popularity as sustainable building material. Could you discuss Sweden's expertise in wooden construction and its potential to contribute to sustainable urban development globally?
Yeah, we really believe in wooden construction from many different perspectives, especially since it has a lower footprint than other. But why we believe it, and I think this is important to understand, because not everyone believes that, if you cut down our trees, that's not good. When I grew up, there was a lot of discussion that you cannot cut down the trees in the Amazonas. So why are we in Sweden cutting down all the trees we have? But doing that is very also connected that we have a very strong policy around forestry, that we also need to all the time make sure that we regrow the forest that we have. And there are very strict regulations on what can you cut down, and that you always need to plant new trees. So when we talk about actually building in wood and how that actually is good from a sustainability perspective, that's actually very closely linked to the policies that we have around our forestry industry. With that said, again, building in wood, it's actually something I think many people around the world is used to, because that's what we did. If you go a few hundred years back, that mud and stones were what we had. So I think this very much reusing old knowledge and ideas, and then we of course have to upgrade it to our new ways of living. I had a discussion last week with a colleague of mine. She said, yeah, but wood, it's easily can be put on fire. I'm like, yeah, and that was relevant if you go 100 years back, because you had a lot of fires or candles in your house. But today we don't have that many anymore. So what's the risk assessment that we are doing? But there's lots of technologies when it comes to fire safety as well when it comes in building in wood. And I think I think that we need to do that overall, whatever area we're talking about, reusing old knowledge and updating it to our current ways of living.
Let's discuss about the importance of collaboration that is key to global sustainability efforts. Can you share with us how Smart Sweden collaborates with international partners to share best practices and promote sustainable urban development globally?
No, that's the whole point of Smart City Sweden, to really showcasing what Sweden has learned and what we have failed in for a global audience. The latest IPCC report says that technology and solutions to do the transition that we need to do globally is available. They are just not at the right place. And how do we know what's available if no one's showing us? So we more or less see Smart City Sweden as a digital platform where we showcase bright, good solutions that we have implemented in Sweden, which we think has really been a key in helping us in our transition. Showcasing that, inspiring others to also take actions or see, can we do this here? You won't be able to do anything, but there is a lot that you could do. And there's also a collaboration platform where we try to match make, international interest with Swedish expertise to find areas to cooperate, to find new innovations. Because to be honest, even if Sweden has reached far, we're still way off. We are still, if you look at our emissions per capita, we are still really high. We need to do more. And we need to learn from others more as well. But we also believe that there's lots that can be learned from us and that we are really proud and we are really also a very innovative country that puts a lot of efforts in doing it even better. And as one thing, I mentioned district heating earlier, and people say, yeah, well, most part of the world, they don't need heat, we need cooling. Yeah, but today there's technologies to reuse excess heat for cooling purposes. So, and these kinds of knowledge is not widely spread. And this, we see that as that's our work to really spread these solutions and inspire people to what can happen elsewhere. Either with Swedish partners or knowledge or with others. But all the Swedish solutions that we have done, the systematic implementations that we have done has not only been Swedish technologies and Swedish solutions, but the system or the holistic perspective, I would say, has been more what's the Swedish part of it. Or the Nordics. I think that we cooperate a lot. We have similar parts in the Nordic countries as well.
Looking ahead, what are the most significant challenges and opportunities in advancing sustainable living in urban environments? And how can initiatives like Smart City Sweden address these challenges effectively?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people are trying to understand what do we really need to do. If you look at the calculations of the emissions, it's still very much related to transport. It's very much related to food, but also our consumption patterns. I think that what we still can do is being this cooperation platform, connecting initiatives, organizations, people with each other that are interested in making a change, to connecting them and to see if we can find new ideas. I don't think we need new technologies many times. It's still what we need is understanding. We need to see how can we change people's mind to see that how can they take on new ideas or thoughts, new business models, because I do understand that, of course, people don't want to stop doing or stop living the way they're living, but how can they do that more sustainable? But there's also still a lot we can do within our industries, not only regarding emissions, but also when we talk about other environmental aspects like water, clean water. Clean air is still an issue globally. So I think that here we can still cooperate much more together to see how we can improve in Sweden and how we can work with others to inspire them to improve as well.
Gender diversity is essential for driving innovation in sustainability, and we are celebrating Green Female Voices at Sustainable Living podcast. Could you discuss any specific initiatives or projects within Smart City Sweden that highlight the unique contribution of women in driving for sustainability and innovation in urban environments?
Within my area, I don't think we haven't really needed, and I think I've been working in male-dominated industries before, and I'm quite happy that it's very female dominated. So there's so many different aspects on this. But if there would be one specific project, there was one project when they were building new houses, villas in one part of this Sweden, and they said we will only do it with female everything, contractors, floor, putting the floors, putting the tiles, everything, every contractor needs to be female, and they could do that. So it's also that even if sustainability or environment is an area that has a lot of women, we can actually inspire women in other industries. It is possible to be a woman in still very, very male-dominated industries. So that was one project where, everyone involved was a woman. I think, of course, you would have like managers and CEOs and some other people being males, but everyone who did the practical part, planning, design, doing all the work, was female. So that would be one project, and I think that also inspire them because they get to meet each other, and that might experience the same challenge, or you inspire to do new things.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights into Sweden's remarkable journey towards sustainable urban development. Thank you, Gina,
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
here with us.
Thank you so much. I was happy to be here. Nice talking to you.